Well, let's get more on all of this. We can speak now to Hassan Khatib, who is the former Minister of Labour of the Palestinian authorities. He joins us from Ramallah. Mr. Khatib, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to speak to us. I'd like to start by asking you about Israel's new land measures. They were announced on Sunday. I mean, does it look to you like de facto annexation that's been announced here?
It's partial de facto annexation. Because Israel is not interested at this stage of annexing the West Bank because of the population. There are a little bit more than 2 million Palestinians living here, and annexing the West Bank will mean a big demographic problem for Israel, and Israel is very sensitive for the demographic aspect in the struggle. Therefore, they are going in a gradual way in different parallel lines of illegal activities. One of them is reducing the population in Area C, which is 2/3 of the West Bank. And the second, making changes in the law that makes confiscation of land much easier. And number three, expediting the process of building new settlements and expanding existing settlements and developing settlement infrastructure in the West Bank, especially in Area C.
Okay, so there's this idea of registering West Bank land as being, quote, state property. This is what they've announced. And I'm just wondering what that's going to mean, just from a sort of concrete point of view, for people who live there, for the Palestinians living there in the West Bank.
This is a very tricky issue, and there is much of deceiving in this concept, because all the land that is not registered officially in the name of its owners are defined by Israel as state land, while in fact it's not, because the Jordanian government, which was in charge or controlling the West Bank before the Israeli occupation, was in the middle of the process of land registration, land settlement. And the occupation interrupted that process. Therefore, more or less half of the Palestinian land that is owned by individual Palestinians are not registered officially, because the registration process, the land settlement process, was not accomplished when the occupation started. Therefore, some of the land that Israel is confiscating on the pretext of being state land, actually it's owned by individual Palestinians who inherited it from their ancestors. So there is a lot of problematic in this concept to start with.
Right. Well, there's been widespread condemnation of this latest Israeli initiative. I think 85 UN member states have condemned it. Is that going to change anything?
It will not change anything, practically speaking, but we welcome this, and we encourage the different governments in the world to move from only condemning this step into holding Israel accountable for such violation of the Palestinian rights and violation of the international rights and human rights. So the Palestinians, and I hope the Arabs as well, and all the friends of Palestine should encourage their efforts to try to develop the international community's attitude from just verbal condemnation into taking measures of the kind that make difference for the Israeli government.
Right, because verbal condemnation, the like of which we heard from the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who called this, quote, unlawful and destabilizing. I mean, talk about stating the obvious. I mean, wouldn't you also like to see the Palestinian leadership doing more?
I would like to see everybody doing more. I like to see the Palestinian Authority doing more, especially in international organizations, and especially moving with the legal efforts in coordination with other states who are willing to do that, to go into the accountability level of the international law. And also, I like to see the Arab governments doing more. And I also like to see the European governments, which invested a lot politically and financially in the idea of the two-state solution to try to rescue the possibility of two-state solution, because the essence of these Israeli measures are about making the two-state solution impossible now and in the future.
We've heard President Trump saying in the past that he opposes annexation. He says that's not going to happen. But why don't you think he has criticized these latest steps?
Because he doesn't really criticize or oppose annexation in the sense that Israel is implementing. He knows probably, and maybe this is why he said it in this language, he knows that Israel is not intending to make a Knesset legislation of annexing the West Bank. He knows that Israel does not have such a plan on the table for the time being. What Israel is doing is practical and gradual grab of the land that is short of annexation, but it's taking us gradually and practically into that position. Therefore, what we expect from everybody, including Donald Trump and the American government, is to take firm position against any Israeli violation of the human rights, of the international laws, and definitely the confiscation of land, the changes of the laws, and the transfer of Jewish population into the occupied land are all clear violations of the international law that needs to be criticized and condemned and held accountable.
And one of the loudest voices and the most prominent figures propagating this kind of language is the finance minister of Israel, Bezalel Smotrich, who talks about encouraging immigration and ending the idea of a Palestinian state. Would you say he is the driving force behind all of this?
I think the driving force is Netanyahu. And I think Smotrich is saying what Netanyahu allows him to say or expects him to say. Therefore, we shouldn't fall in the trap of imagining that there are moderate elements in this Israeli government and extreme elements like Smotrich. I think that all of them, led by Netanyahu, are behind the kind of policies that Smotrich is implementing. But we need to say that all these attempts and plans and efforts are not succeeding in convincing any Palestinian actually to immigrate or leave. That is correct for the Palestinians in the West Bank, and that is correct for the Palestinians in East Jerusalem. In spite of all efforts to push Palestinians from occupied Jerusalem outside, hasn't been successful. The Palestinians have been able to maintain more or less the same population in spite of all this pressure, because the Israeli pressure is one important element that we need to focus on, but also the Palestinian resilience and the Palestinian steadfastness is another aspect that we need to also look at and encourage and empower.
Just keeping our eye on the Israeli political landscape for a moment before we move on to some other subjects. I mean, this is obviously an election year for Prime Minister Netanyahu. And clearly everything he does is going to be, with a view to trying to win that election or bring about greater chance of him having a leading role in a coalition and being able to form a coalition. What do you see as the link between these announcements about land measures in the West Bank and Netanyahu's electoral ambitions?
I think there is a clear link because the Israeli society has been radicalized dramatically in the last few years, especially in the last 2 years, but even before. And therefore, usually when elections approach, the different competing Israeli parties try to please the public by showing more extreme and more tough practices and attitudes and policies vis-a-vis the Palestinian land and the Palestinian population in the West Bank and Gaza, including East Jerusalem. And we can explain partially the increase in these Israeli illegal measures by the fact that Israel is in an election year.
Let's turn our attention before we wrap up to tomorrow's first meeting of President Trump's Board of Peace. It's uncharted territory, and it could have serious consequences, far-reaching consequences for the Palestinian people. Turkey says this meeting and this board could revive a two-state solution. We already know that there's going to be a multi-billion-dollar reconstruction fund for Gaza. Do you share the sort of optimism that Turkey is voicing about what that board could achieve?
Actually, if this board was succeed in one thing, it is lowering the expectations, especially of the Palestinians, and in particular those in Gaza, of that council. And I think it is important, on one hand, to listen to what the members are saying, including the Turkish, but also the American. But it is more important to listen to what the Israelis are saying in this regard. And it is clear that Israel is not happy at all with the plans of that council. And Israel is the party controlling Gaza Strip. And the United States consider Gaza and the West Bank to be under the Israeli domain in a way or another. And therefore, I expect that Israel is going to call the shots in terms of the differences in views between Israel and the members of this council, including the United States. Israel is expert in transforming the transitional arrangements into permanent arrangements. And the current transition in Gaza is very comfortable to Israel. Israel is controlling 53% of Gaza, empty of population and adjacent to Israel. And this is very comfortable and tempting a status quo that I guess Israel will make all the efforts to transfer into permanent. That's why I expect that moving from the first phase of the Trump's plan into the second phase is going to be very difficult, and it's going to take a long time, and it will involve a lot of tension within that council, especially with Israel.
But given the voices that are present at that table and how invested they are financially and politically and in other ways too, to be at that table, I mean, their voices cannot be ignored, can they?
Well, from previous experiences, whenever there were tactical differences between Israel and the United States over issues related to Israel and the surrounding areas, Israel always find ways to have things their way. They can use the fact that they are the party on the ground. They can use also they can pull strings in the United States, which is something they did with previous presidents. So what I'm suggesting is that it's important to listen to what the members of that council have been saying, but it's more important also to listen to what Israel has been saying about the future of Gaza. And Israel is not happy at all with the fancy ideas of transferring Gaza into a Riviera. Israel did not destroy Gaza in order to allow anybody to transfer it into Riviera. I think Israel is interested in keeping Gaza in a miserable situation as long as they can, and they are also interested in maintaining misery, hoping that this will convince as much as possible of the Gazans to leave Gaza.
Yeah, but it's going to be very difficult for them to carry on with voicing those sorts of messages in that type of forum where people are paid $1 billion to be at the table. You know, they won't be able to simply propagate the same arguments that they have done in the past, will they? I mean, let's be slightly optimistic just to wrap up.
Well, let's see what will happen regarding the most immediate requirement by Israel and the United States this time, which is the disarmament of Gaza. If they succeed in reaching an agreement or arrangements by that, and if the other members in the council will take serious positions and stands behind their intentions and statements, they might be able to convince Israel. But until then, I have difficulties being optimistic about the future of Gaza.
Okay, well, we're going to have to leave it there, but we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Ghassan Khatib, former Minister of Labour of the Palestinian Authority. Thank you for your time, sir.
You're welcome.